I grew up in a family that talked about world events, U.S. events, politics at the table, at the dinner table. We talked about civil rights movement, the women's movement, the war in Vietnam. I grew up in the 60s and the 70s. And so early on, I knew that these issues that were in the world and in the United States were also intensely important to us as average Americans. And I think implicit in that, I grew up understanding that part of that importance was the responsibility to vote. As I've gotten older, I've learned that in order to understand the power of the vote, we have to look at the lengths to which people have gone to keep some folks from exercising that power. Two examples come to mind. One is, as an adult, I learned more about the women's suffrage movement. I think we often tell sanitized versions of some of these social movements to our children, and we learn these. But as I learned more about the women's suffrage movement, I learned about the Silent Sentinels in 1917 the women who protested in front of the White House. And that these women were arrested, imprisoned, beaten, went on hunger strikes, and were force-fed before they were finally released. And it was only a year or two later that women did get the right to vote. Too often we've told a very sanitized story of how the Voting Rights Act was passed. But in 2015, I got to be on the Edmund Pettus Bridge to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, along with many, many thousands of other people. And felt the weight of understanding the violence that had been used against African Americans to keep them from voting. With that understanding, voting goes for me, from being a routine act to becoming more of a sacred responsibility that I have for a little while and that I want to pass on. We're expecting our first grandchild in November, almost to the day of Election Day. And I deeply hope that he or she has that right all their lives. I know others have probably used the same, but I grew up understanding and still believe that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. But I also understand now that bending toward justice is in no way inevitable, that it only comes when we rise up and do the very routine, sacred responsibility of voting. My name is Sherry Brewer. I am endowed with the sacred responsibility of voting, and I vote.